Well, good morning, everyone. Sorry to be a little bit late, but seems like I'm getting slower and slower every day. So I don't know where I'm headed for, but I'll be 91 in August if I make it, maybe. Anyway, I had the doctor's appointment last week, and he did a lot of different things, and he said, "You're in fine shape." He found nothing wrong. But then they did the blood test. Hi. They did the blood test, and the doctor left a message on my machine this morning. He wants to see me. So I don't know what that means at all. So I won't know until I call him this afternoon. Something he found in, I guess, in the blood test. I don't know. Anyway, this morning we're going to have Josh Cutler as our speaker, as you know. But before I ask Josh to come to the speaking, I'm going to go into the meeting for July. The speaker for July 1st meeting is going to be our own town administrator, Cody Haddock. Cody's a great guy. He's done a great job with John Bruno. And I didn't know if I could get him to be a speaker or not because there's so much going on, but he said yes, he could be our speaker for July 1st. So it will be our own town administrator, Cody, for the speaker. Did you say something, Joe? Not really. Then our speaker for August is going to be Michelle Alex. She's going to be we had her just a few months ago, but this is on some new things with the Registry of Motor Vehicles. It's driving decisions. I'm kind of glad that we have her for August meeting because my license expires on August 11th. Now, there's another question mark in my life here. Am I going to get my license renewed, or are they going to say, no, you're going to turn it in and you have to walk wherever you're going? I don't know. Did you say I'll drive anyway? Joe, we have a police officer. We have a police officer, a Joe up there. Joe remembers things that you say.
I hope so.
Well, I hope he don't remember that.
Well, if they don't give you a license, that's how you're going to have to get around.
Well, you got a little car, because there's room for two people?
And if you really want to ride, I'll put you in the trunk.
Oh, it has a trunk too? Well, where do you sit? Where do you sit in it?
I sit right here in the front seat.
Oh, so you have a front seat too? Okay. Looked to me like it was a lawnmower. Okay, so August 5th will be the one from the Register of Motor Vehicles. And September 9th, that will be the meeting date in September. We're going to have the Plymouth County Sheriff, Joe McDonald, is our speaker. And I'm glad that Lois, we got together, and I'm glad that the sheriff can be here for that meeting. It's going to be the history of the sheriff's department, so it will be very interesting. And I think we should have the Chris, I think we should tell Tim Cruz about this. You didn't hear me? For September, Chris, we're going to have the sheriff as our speaker. And I know that the sheriff and Tim usually go together when they're going different places, so I want to make sure that Tim knows that. And that's going to be September 9th. September 9th. So I guess that's it for now. So this morning I'm going to introduce Josh Cutler. Josh, you want to come up too?
Thank you. Good to see you again.
We knew Josh from a lot of different ways, and especially when he was here with the Plymouth County representative, and he was taking different positions in different towns when the towns merged together. Was it 3 towns or 2 towns?
I represented Hanson,
Hanson,
Pembroke,
and
Duxbury,
Halifax.
and
And
part of Marshfield and Halifax. Yeah.
Boy, so you had plenty to do.
Yes, yes.
And now you're going to be with the Governor Healy. You know, you're really going up, aren't you?
I don't know if I'd say that, but yes.
You know what? You know what I'd like to have you do for me?
What's that?
I've asked everybody in the State House and everywhere. They don't listen to me. Anyway,
I have to right now. So tell me that.
I would love to have, before I end doing this type of thing, to have the Secretary of State, Bill Galvin, as my speaker.
For here? For
Yes, for Halifax. For Halifax.
You asked him?
I tried getting a hold of him, and I got some woman on the phone, and she said she'd get back to me, and then she hung up. So,
Okay.
so I don't know if that was the secretary or just someone answered the phone or walked by. So,
We can certainly ask. I'm sure we can get someone from his office. Yeah.
so maybe I'll leave that with you, Josh.
Okay.
Sometime between.
Sounds like you got a full schedule though. You got the Sheriff
Well,
McDonald
no.
coming. You got town manager. You got a good crew here.
No, I'll tell you what we got here. We got October and November. October and
We're
November.
open. Okay. All right.
Do you think that would be good?
Well, let's see how this goes first, because he's going to ask me how it goes, and if it doesn't go so well, you know.
Well, the governor, you're working with the governor now.
Yes, yes.
Okay, well, good luck.
All right. Thank you.
I'll get out of your way in a minute.
Can you guys hear me if I just use it without the mic?
Yeah.
Does that work? Okay. All right. So let me.
Okay, Josh, all yours.
Thank you. All right. Put this in here. All right. Good morning, everybody. Good morning. Enjoy. Excellent. Well, so this is our. We had it. Yeah. You're being sassy, and that's what happens. You know. All right, well, good morning, everybody. So my name is Josh Cutler. I think I've met you before. Not either, but I joined Halifax TRIAD. So I am currently working for Governor Healy. I used to serve as state representative here on the South Shore for a long time. Next door in Hanson and in Halifax. Hanson, Pembroke, Duxbury, and for a short time Halifax as well. But I am here today not to talk politics, except of the 19th century driving. Want to share a little bit about a new book that I've written about the history of the State House. And I have some trivia questions for you, so I hope you'll, I was told this is a very smart audience, so we'll see how you guys measure up. And I have some books to give out to the winners.
Somebody lied.
Oh, I'm sure that's true. So, and so I have a little sort of a PowerPoint here I'm going to walk through to kind of get some fun facts and history about the State House. Before I dive into that, though, I like to kind of just always share a little bit about sort of the quote-unquote author journey. I think sometimes it's interesting. So I am not an author by trade, although I was in the newspaper business for a long time before getting into the legislature. But some of you know, obviously many of you know Tom Hanson next door. Does anybody know who the Tom Hanson was named after? Any guesses? Somebody want to guess? You've been talking again. Mr. Hanson, there you go, that's correct. Named after Mr. Hanson. Who was Mr. Hanson? Well, hey, it was Mr. Halifax we care, right? So, town of Hanson is named after someone named Alexander Hanson. And if you think about it, a lot of the town names around here either come from sort of Mother England, like Duxbury or Pembroke, or were named after Native American tribes or Native American connections. And so the town of Hanson turns out is named after this Federalist newspaper publisher during the War of 1812 from Baltimore, Maryland. And when I learned about that, that's pretty interesting. That's not a typical way to name the town, New England town after it. So there must be a story there. And so I decided that I would write it. And so I spent a good amount of time researching Alexander Hanson, traveled down to Maryland, to Baltimore to learn more about him and what he was all about. He was quite an interesting and colorful character, I will tell you. And there's actually some Halifax connections, because one of his colleagues was a man named James Lincoln, and I believe there's a Lincoln Avenue here in Halifax, and I never was able to verify 100%, but I'm pretty sure it was also named after James Lincoln at the same time that Hanson was named after Alexander Hanson. And so anyway, I wrote the book. It was called Mobtown Massacre, and it's all about what happened during the War of 1812 to Alexander Hanson. So that was sort of my first attempt at authorship, and I had a lot of fun. It was a labor of love, as it were. And so that was maybe 6 years ago, I think, by now. So after I did that book, I decided that got the itch again, and during COVID, when I had a little bit extra time on my hands, and if you're a local state representative, I'm used to going to local meetings all the time after work, and you no longer can. During COVID, you have a little more time on your hands, and so I decided to try another project. And so this time I focused on something that happened in Boston, which was the early abolitionist movement in Boston, and a particular event that happened in 1835 called the Boston Gentlemen's Mob, which was a riot. A riot that happened in the streets of Boston, right near the old State House in 1835, and it really became a pivotal moment in the history of the abolitionist movement in Boston and sort of rippled throughout New England and the nation. And so I wrote this book called The Boston Gentlemen's Mob, and it's all about that event and a woman named Mariah Chapman, who was another South Shore person. Hey, Stephanie, another South Shore person from Weymouth, who played a pivotal role in speaking out and trying to advocate and support the abolitionists and against the men who were rioting in the streets against them. So that was kind of a fun project, number 2. And so that kind of leads me to the book today, which is called Under the Golden Dome. And this was something, so as I mentioned, I worked at the State House for about 10 years, and when I was younger, I served as a legislative aide as well. So I've spent some time at the State House. But, I never really fully appreciated or kind of knew all the history that went on in the building. And so this was an attempt to sort of rectify that. And now that I was kind of part of the State House, I had an opportunity to kind of write this book and sort of tell some of the historical tales about the State House. Because I know some of you have gone to the Hall of Flags earlier, right? Who has been to the State House and visited in the past? Daphne, I know you have. This is okay. And so there's a lot of history there. The Hall of Flags, you walk around, the history in every room and every floor. And so this is an attempt to kind of tell some of those stories. So it's Under the Golden Dome, Historic Talks and Tales of the Massachusetts State House. So I wanted to kind of say a little bit about the book. I picked out a few kind of interesting vignettes and little stories and anecdotes to walk you through here. And got to answer questions at the end. And again, I'm going to kind of cover you with some trivia questions as we go through. Does that okay? All right, Stephanie, I'm going to tell you the ones you can't answer, okay? You know too much. All right. So let's start. So, okay. Well, first off, the State House. It used to be called the New State House, and that's because we used to have our city government at the Old State House. And you can see here the Old State House. And anybody know who that gentleman right here is? Any guesses? Give me a good hint. That's right, yes. Sam Adams, who was our governor back during the 1790s when the cornerstone of the New State House was first built. And here was a building that was designed by architect Charles Bulfinch, who's pictured here. And here's a picture, a schematic of the New State House. So it looks, I'm sure it looks familiar to folks. And so it was 1798 that we moved officially to the New State House. which used to be a pasture that was owned by John Hancock. And it had great views of Boston Harbor, which is one of the reasons why it was chosen. And so the whole legislature proceeded down State Street and had a parade and marched up until the new State House took effect in 1798. And this is our governor at the time, Governor Increased Sumner was his last name, who was the governor at the time. And you can see here a couple of the earliest images of the new State House painting and then one of the earliest engravings of the new State House. Looks very similar to what it does today, for those of you who've seen it. I'm sure everybody's seen a picture of it, right? So that's our new State House. So that's what we're talking about here. This is just, this is kind of cool. You probably can't read this, but this is an original copy of the original journal entry from the very first session to the new State House in 1798. So notes of the first session. This is a copy of that, which is our State House library. It's kind of cool. So, one of the things that's kind of neat about our State House is that there's been a lot of important people that have visited there over the years, including this gentleman who is
Poor posture.
poor posture. Why does he have poor posture? Because he's at Anybody know? Want to guess who it was? I heard a couple voices in the back. FDR Roosevelt? No. We're in the general area. William Howard Taft. All right. So this gentleman, I just heard someone say Teddy Roosevelt. So Teddy Roosevelt. Roosevelt's the right answer. Another former president. Okay. Richard Nixon. This one's a little bit tougher. This is a head of state from another country. This was the future president, King Edward VII. Who visited when he was still a prince, visited the State House. And who do we have here? So this is a picture from the steps of the State House in 1928. You might be quizzing, like looking at me quizzically, well, how could that be, right? Well, this is in fact 1928. That is not Abraham Lincoln, who obviously was assassinated well before then. This is a gentleman named Lincoln Caswell, who was an Abraham Lincoln impersonator who visited at that time. It looked remarkably like the former president. What you say? I was convinced. So some heads of state and then one winger that wasn't truly a head of state that have all visited the State House over the years. So you guys did well. That last one kind of tricky. And here's a good picture of Lincoln Caswell. Yeah. And his first name was Lincoln. That was So we've had a lot of trailblazing women that have visited the Avian Mark on the State House. One of the most notable is a woman named Angelina Grimke, who was a South Carolina native and daughter of slaveholders who became an ardent abolitionist. And she came and moved up to the north and started to speak out against slavery and advocate for women's rights. And so in 1838, she became the first woman ever to speak publicly before a state legislature. So she came and spoke at the State House in 1838. She made history. And people think politicians are very full of hot air and talkative today. But back then, they talked much, much longer. That was typical. They talked for hours at a time. And so she actually gave a speech over 3 days. And 3 different days. And that was pretty typical. So
I know somebody like that.
yes, not me, but yes. So Angelina Grimke was a pioneer abolitionist and made history at the State House back in 1838. Dorothea Dix is another woman who really made her mark. She spent 2 years investigating the treatment of the mentally ill. She traveled to different almshouses and local jails and really did a lot of investigating to reveal some of the horrific abuses that were happening to people who were mentally ill and people who were locked up. And her efforts led to major reforms and the expansion of mental health care in Massachusetts. She came to the State House and presented this 32-page petition which detailed all of the investigations that she had undertaken over the last 2 years, and it really made a big impact. Got a lot of news coverage, made a big impact, led to a series of reforms, and really opened the doors to re-looking at how we treat the mentally ill. And she became then, after making her mark here in Massachusetts, she became a national figure and went around the country advocating for the mentally ill. She even went to Rome and got an audience with the Pope and convinced him to expand treatment for the poor and mentally ill. So Dorothea Dix made her mark starting here in the Massachusetts State House. And then the third one I wanted to note here, and these are all different chapters in the book that I talk about in more depth here. Helen Keller, I'm sure most of you have probably heard of the name Helen Keller. She was obviously a woman who was an amazing advocate for the blind, and she spoke here in 1903, just as a young college student. She was a student at Radcliffe University, and she spoke one of her first times ever speaking out in public. She was already, even by then, at the age of like 21, she was already very well known. Even in her young, as a teenager, she was very well known for her brilliance. But she spoke here at this legislative hearing in 1903 to advocate for vocational training for the for the hearing impaired and visual impaired. And her efforts, she really, again, a lot of big audience, everyone wanted to come and hear what she had to say. And her testimony really had an impact, and it led to the creation of the Massachusetts Commission for the Blind, which exists today. And some of you may be familiar with it, and you have friends who were take advantage of the services. So we can thank Helen Keller in large part for helping to drive that and create the Massachusetts Commission for the Blind. So 3 women who had a remarkable impact here in Massachusetts, and in some cases across the country, all through the Massachusetts State House under the Golden Gate. I wanted to talk about another kind of fun thing. A lot of traditions in the State House. We talked about the Hall of Flags. Those of you who visited, see all the history and the tradition that we have there. This gentleman gave us some important traditions, and I'd be shocked if anyone can identify him. I couldn't pick him out of a picture. This is a former governor. Anybody have any clues or want to guess what his name is? Just guess. What's my name?
George.
Last name? All right, so change it by 1 letter and you get?
Butler.
Butler, there you go. All right, Butler. Governor Benjamin Butler. Okay, so there's no reason he shouldn't have his name. He was a one-term governor. He had a very distinguished military career, but he was basically a one-term governor. Not a lot happened during his 2 years in office. It was a 2-year term back then. But he left 2 important traditions. One of which is he left this handsome leather Bible with a handwritten inscription to his successor. And that has become a tradition that's carried on to this day. Every governor on their last day in office leaves the handwritten Butler Bible to their successor. So when Governor Charlie Baker left office, he handed off to Governor Healy the Butler Bible. So it continues that tradition on today. The second tradition is what's called the Lone Walk, the Long Walk, which is something that has become a big deal now. Back then, it was sort of by accident. So on his very last day in office, Governor Butler was sort of sitting in the governor's office. All the pomp and circumstances happening in the house, because that's where they were swearing in the new governor. And he didn't know what to do with himself, so he just left. And he walked out. And they called it the Lone Walk. And so a tradition was born that every time a governor is leaving public service, leaving the State House, they'll take a lone walk outside the State House, down the steps of the front of the building, into the Boston Commons to sort of symbolize their return to, to private life, And so that became known as the Lone Walk. And every governor now does that Lone Walk. So that tradition all began because of this guy, Governor Butler. And I wanted to just kind of briefly talk on the Lone Walk tradition, because it's become kind of a fun thing. This is a picture of Governor Charles Hurley in 1939, so flash forward quite a few years. And by then, as you can kind of tell here, the Lone Walk became quite a spectacle. And people would gather on the halls and in the corridors and watch the governor as he or she, well, all he for now, would come down and make their exit. And so this is Governor Hurley, we'll back up. And every governor since then has continued to do that. So I have a quick Lone Walk trivia quiz here, okay? And whoever gets the most ones right will get a copy of the book here. So this pays to pay attention, right? And no Googling it, all right? All right, so I already told you the first Lone Walk was Governor Butler, right, okay. Who has done the most Lone Walks? Now, you can figure this out if you think about it. This would have to be a governor that was in office twice with non-consecutive terms. So who would be one governor that might have been governor twice? Dukakis, thank you, that's correct. There's another one, and many of you might remember him as well. No, he was in for 2 terms, but they were consecutive. This would have to be someone who left office, came back, and did it again. So one is Governor Dukakis. The other, I'll tell you, is John Volpe. Governor Volpe, who was governor twice in the 60s and early 70s, but non-consecutive, left and then came back. And so both Governor Dukakis and Governor Volpe did the lone walk twice. If you think about it, they left office twice. Governor Dukakis also has another interesting lone walk trivia in that, well, I kind of gave it away, but who had the longest lone walk? Governor Dukakis. And that's because when he left the State House, he did his lone walk down the steps of the State House. He didn't stop. He kept going. He walked all the way to Quincy Market and he went to a Greek restaurant, and everybody had a celebration there. So his lone walk continued all the way to Faneuil Hall, Quincy Market. Here's a tough one. Who had the first televised lone walk? This is really tough. It was Governor Robert Bradford. The most interesting part to me is how early it was. It was 1949. I never would have guessed that early that they were televising this event, but they did. Who had the briefest lone walk? This is a much more recent governor, and I will say she had the briefest lone walk. That's a big hint.
I can't remember the name.
It was brief and also Swift. Governor Swift. Governor Jane Swift had the shortest lone walk. She descended all 32 steps in under a minute. So she must have been just anxious to get out of there. The most dramatic lone walk. Anybody want to guess who the most dramatic lone walk was? And this is someone who, some of you, if you go back early in the last may recall. Who was one of our most dramatic governors? Also most dramatic mayors. Most colorful, often called. Do you want to guess? James Michael Curley. Have you heard the name of the rascal kid? James Michael Curley. He was mayor of Boston, also the governor of Massachusetts. And so on his last day in office, he got married. And he brought his bride along, and he went off on his honeymoon. He also had a band playing Till We Meet Again, as he made his descent along the steps. So he was a colorful mayor and colorful governor. So, all right, so we had some quick fun trivia. So who had the most right answers on that? So you got the top job, so I'm going to give that one to you. Good job. Congratulations. All right, so I'm going to talk about this last one right here. This painting right here. This is a neat tradition that we have here at the State House. This was a painting that dates to 1865. Governor John Andrew, at the end of the Civil War, when all the troops came back from battle, they returned their battle flags, so their tattered battle flags. It was tradition in the past where you always carry the colors into battle, and that was a big part of it. And in fact, the gentleman who led the procession had been carrying the colors during the Civil War, and he was shot, and he lost an arm, and then he continued to persevere and carry the tattered colors of his regiment until help came. And so it was a big deal to return those colors back to the State House. And so they had a big ceremony here, presided over by Governor John Andrew in 1865, marking the return of the tattered Civil War colors back to the State House. And so you can see here, you can see the soldiers marching up the steps of the State House to return the colors. And they put them in what's now known as Memorial Hall. And if you've been to the State House, that big, beautiful Italian marble room as you walk in after Door Hall is called Memorial Hall. And this mural is painted up on the top of the ceiling to commemorate all of those battle flags which were returned. And now you can actually see them. There's actually, some of them are original, some of them are replicas in the walls, all of the different regiments' colored flags. So a big and very impactful tradition that happened in 1865. So, just some fun and serious different traditions that have happened over the years at the State House. Let's skip over this one for some time, but I have a fun one here. Here we go. So this is another fun tradition, depending on your point of view. So people sometimes, occasionally, get irritated with the legislature, right? That has happened before, and accuse us of engaging in shenanigans, let's say. But this is actually the floor of the Massachusetts House of Representatives, okay, during the 1930s. So this is literally where I used to work in the House chamber. And you can see they have a dance floor, they have dancers with roller skates, there's a vaudeville guy playing piano. They are having a whole party in there, and this was quite a festive occasion. This was a tradition that used to happen for quite a while, known as mock session. And so on the last day of session, okay, and it's because in the old days, when they were ready to get bills printed, they would approve the bills, and they would send in what's called the engrossing division, where they literally engross the bills, and that process could take a number of hours. And so there was this sort of time to kill by the time that the legislature ended, before they could actually go home, while they waited for all the bills to be engrossed. And so they would have these mock sessions, and they grew into quite elaborate events. And so this is a picture of one that happened. They were all different. This happened every year in both the House and the Senate. All different kinds of partying and shenanigans that went on. And eventually the tradition sort of petered out in the 1960s, or in the 1950s after World War II, and eventually it kind of went away altogether. But for a long time, this mock session tradition was something that was an annual rite of passage in the Massachusetts legislature. So anytime you get mad at the legislature today, think how it used to be back then, and hopefully you'll smile a little bit. So another tradition. So another tradition we have at the State House, under the Golden Dome, is protest. Anytime you go to the State House, it's not uncommon to see people out front of the State House, advocating on issues, protesting. That's democracy. It was kind of fun when I worked there. I could open my window and I could hear people chanting, and always trying to kind of figure out what was today's cause that they were chanting about. And sometimes I agreed with it, sometimes I didn't. But it was always kind of neat to have that vibrancy of democracy right there at the State House. And so you can imagine over the years there have been all kinds of protests that have happened at the State House. This is a famous one that happened in 1919. A group of women were advocating in front of the State House in support of women's suffrage. And so they were trying to embarrass President Wilson, who was coming to Boston to visit. And so they had this banner that they had unfurled, trying to put pressure on, I said government, President Wilson, trying to put pressure on President Wilson and Congress to pass the women's suffrage amendment. And so they had this banner, and they got arrested, and they actually spent the night in jail. And it was supposedly really nasty conditions in the jail. And it got a lot of attention because, when people found out these women had all been locked up overnight, they were outraged. And the women succeeded in getting a lot of attention for their protest. And you better believe it, very soon after, within 6 months, the women's suffrage amendment was passed and signed into law, and women had the right to vote. So just an example of the power of protest. This is one much more recently. This is 1947. You can see people complaining about taxes. It's nothing new. This is a protest about the sales tax. There had been a recent increase in the income tax from 1.5% to 2.5% in Massachusetts. And so people were here to protest that. And then if you flash forward a little bit more recently, this is one of the bigger protests we've ever seen at the State House. This happened in 1970. Students swarmed the State House to protest the military invasion of Cambodia, which happened just a few days after the Kent State Massacre. For those of you who may recall those events, momentous events. So this is a major protest. It's also one of the reasons why the Liberty Bell, which I don't know if you can really see in this photograph, is no longer outside of the State House. Because it used to be outside the State House, and after this protest, they decided to move it inside the State House, which is where it is today. So the Liberty Bell replica that we were given to commemorate the Liberty Bell in Philadelphia is now inside the State House because of this protest that happened in 1970. So, a few just examples of big protests that have happened over the years at the State House. Had a lot of different lawmakers who made their mark over the years at the State House. Wanted to just mention a couple here. So we have Rep. Mitchell and Rep. Walker, who were first African-American lawmakers in Massachusetts history. Representative Walker was from Charlestown. Representative Mitchell was from Boston. They were elected both in 1867. And then the third gentleman here is Representative Watson Hammond, who was the first known Native American legislator in Massachusetts. And he was elected in 1886. And he was from, anybody guess what town he was from? Not too far away from us. A little further south. Not too far. Would it? Nashby, yes, he was from Nashby. So, very. And then I was Representative Susan Fitzgerald, who was one of the first 2 women elected to the legislature in 1923. Speaking of, I wanted to just stop here for a moment and share a quick little fun story. Representative Sylvia Donaldson was the other of the first 2 women to be elected to the Massachusetts legislature in 1923. And she also has another historical note, which is that she was the first woman to serve as speaker, and I'm going to put that in air quotes, speaker for the day. There's a tradition in the legislature, as Stephanie knows, that the presiding officer, who's up on the rostrum, with the gavel directing the flow of bills and testimony and such, isn't always the Speaker of the House. Oftentimes the Speaker designates a member to serve as the Speaker. In fact, it's fairly rare for the Speaker to actually be serving standing on the dais, unless it's truly a momentous kind of occasion. And so you have a speaker for the day who presides. And so for the first time ever in Massachusetts history, a woman was chosen to preside over the House floor, and it was Sylvia Donaldson. And she was a lawmaker from Brockton, so again, not too far. We're trying to keep it South Shore whenever we can. Sylvia Donaldson, and this will show you how things have changed a bit. She was a Republican. So she was a Republican lawmaker from Brockton, which today would be surprising. And she was a former school teacher. She was a retired school teacher, was a very well-respected legislator. She was almost 6 feet tall, had a very stern visage, and was well-liked and respected by her colleagues. And so on February 18th, 1926, Representative Donaldson became the first speaker to serve in the House. The first time the words Madam Speaker were issued in the history of the legislature. So kind of a cool little history. And you can see here on the left is a cartoon that was in the Boston Globe that depicts her election and her history-making moment. All right, another thing. So we've all heard, I assume everyone's heard about the gerrymander. Anybody want to explain in your own words what the gerrymandering is? No? Okay, all right. Well, that's fine. Then we'll learn. So gerrymandering is, well, let's find out how he was born first, and then we'll figure it out. But, so this guy right here is Governor Elbridge Gerry, or Jerry, depending on how you pronounce your G's, in 1812. And Governor Gerry is well known for one particular reason, which is that the gerrymander, which is a term, everyone's at least heard of that term, I assume. The word gerrymander, you hear on CNN all the time. It's basically the art or the science of manipulating legislative districts to benefit a particular political party or a particular state or a particular cause, okay? So it's changing districts, political boundaries around to benefit a particular constituency. And so Governor Gerry was the governor in 1812, and a bill came before him to change the legislative boundaries of the state, and so he reviewed it, and he signed the bill into law. And what it did is it created this kind of bizarrely shaped districts, one in particular up on the North Shore, and because of the way it was created, it looked like a salamander. And so someone in the newspaper christened it a gerrymander, and the term really stuck. It was published for the first time in a newspaper in 1812, and it became very quickly cemented in sort of political lore that when you made crazy-looking districts to benefit a particular political party, it became known as a gerrymander, and it's all because of Governor Elbridge Gerry. And that term spread, and now is used, all over the country when people are talking about that. And there's all kinds of reasons people change political boundaries. It might be to help one political party or another. Back then, it was because Governor Gerry was a Democratic Republican, and the opposition party was a Federalist, and he was trying to benefit his Democratic Republican party at the expense of the Federalists, and vice versa. It might be because of different states trying to gerrymander. It might be because different ethnic groups trying to change things, or geographic reasons. There's all kinds of reasons. And certainly it was a practice that happened before Governor Gerry, but it was never known quite the way it was never practiced maybe quite so controversially, and it didn't get its name until Governor Jerry came along. So we can thank him for giving birth to the gerrymander. And here you can see, this is a district that looked like a salamander that was christened the gerrymander. So it's up on the North Shore, Amesbury, that area. Another great tradition. So this is a fun thing. How are we doing on time? I have a couple more quick stories and we'll wrap it up. Calvin Coolidge was someone who is a not super well-known former president, but he was a state representative here in Massachusetts, a state senator, a governor, a vice president, and president of the United States. And he was sort of known as a man of a few words, silent cow, but he had quite an interesting career. And really, we can really point back to a speech that he gave in the Massachusetts State House back in 1914, called his Have Faith in Massachusetts speech, that really springboarded him to the national scene and really ultimately led to him becoming elected president of the United States. And it was all a speech about how proud he was of Massachusetts and that the way we did things here in Massachusetts, he hoped would spread to other states. And so he wrote a speech about it. It turned out to be very well known and famous. It was republished as a book. You can see it here. And the story goes that during the 1920 Republican Convention, so there was a disagreement about who should serve as vice president. It was Warren Harding, who was the presidential nominee for the Republican Party, Warren Harding, and they were trying to decide who should be the vice president. Back in those days, it wasn't done by final, it was done at the political conventions. And so there was a disagreement that had multiple ballots, nobody could agree. And then eventually, this one delegate from the state of Oregon, totally at random, decided to nominate Calvin Coolidge to be vice president. He was asked later on, he said it's because he read his book, Have Faith in Massachusetts, and was so impressed with him that he thought he'd be a great vice president. So after a number of votes, lo and behold, Calvin Coolidge was selected to be the vice presidential candidate for the Republican Party in 1920. He was elected vice president. He later then, when Warren Harding passed away, became president. And so we can kind of look back and really pinpoint that it was his speech that he gave here in the Massachusetts State Senate, Have Faith in Massachusetts, that really launched him on that career. So kind of a fun little trivia. It's a good speech. I'm going to go through these kind of quickly just to keep time going. So Amelia Earhart, people are familiar with or heard of Amelia Earhart. Why was she famous? For flying, yeah, absolutely. So she came and spoke here at the State House after her first transatlantic flight, a history-making flight. And then kind of another aviation first here. This is kind of a fun one. This is a gentleman named Ronway Corrigan, who also made history in 1938. He built an aircraft out of reclaimed parts, out of basically junk parts. And so he originally wanted to fly from New York to Ireland. But the authorities didn't think his plane was safe enough, so they refused to grant a flight plan. And so instead he decided he would fly back to the West Coast. So his plane took off from New York, and it quickly kind of disappeared behind the clouds. And then the next day, for some reason or the other, he appeared and landed safely in Dublin, Ireland. And when the authorities questioned, because they refused to give him flight clearance to go that way, he said he made a mistake and the weather had caused a malfunction in his navigation. And instead of flying in the wrong direction, so he became known as Ronway Corrigan. Nobody believed his story, but the nickname stuck, and Ronway Corrigan was celebrated as better here at the State House in 1938. Kind of fun. Okay, so a more serious time period during World War II. This is Governor Leverett Saltonstall, who was taking a blowtorch towards the iron gates of the State House. During the war, there was a big effort to recycle scrap metal for the war effort, needed to help manufacturing. So they made the decision to take down the iron fence all around the State House and use it for scrap metal. And so ceremoniously, Governor Saltonstall took a blowtorch out to cut out the first bars, and eventually the whole fence was taken down. You can see the photo on the right here. It's actually an image of Adolf Hitler. It was tacked up on the fence that the governor used the blowtorch on, so symbolically showing his his views there. And they were able to get quite a bit of scrap metal, 35 tons, to the war effort. So. All right, a little lighter fare here. This is, who knows Jackie Gleason? You guys must have a Jackie Gleason, right? Okay. Yes. All right, let me see if this audio works. All right, so that's just a quick clip. I don't think you really hear it. I'm sorry, the audio wasn't great, but a quick clip of Jackie Gleason, who visited the State House in 1959. He was starring in an off-Broadway play. Was visiting the State House, and a fun quick story here is that there was a big bill at the time to legalize the game of Beano, which is sort of like a form of bingo. And it was controversial at the time because it had some ties to organized crime. There was some controversy about whether the state should legalize it or not. And so Nixon got up and made some, kind of fun remarks, clips from the dais. And then he saw the copy of the bill, the Beano bill, on the top of the desk there, and he made just a very offhand comment. He said, quote, "Oh, it's a game. From the looks of this, I might stay and run this instead of going back to Hollywood." And his remarks were seen as a jab at the game of bingo, at the game of Beano, excuse me. And later that day, the bill was narrowly defeated by 5 votes. And the press credited really Jackie Gleason with helping to defeat the Beano bill. They said that Gleason did more to stop Beano than the legislators did. And so kind of a funny little clip. Obviously we don't know if that's true or not, but they didn't legalize Beano, so we can thank Jackie Gleason for that. Of course, now we have flowery and all kinds of things, so who knows. But the Beano bill didn't do so well, but his play did very well, and eventually went from off-Broadway and was played on Broadway for a number of years. All right, I got two left. Are we doing okay on time? Yeah. Really momentous day that happened at the State House in 1965. Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. addressed the state legislature. There's a picture here of him. He was on a 2-day visit to Boston. Again, since 1965. It was arranged by his friend, Representative Michael Haynes. You can see one of the photos, who was also a fellow Baptist minister. King spoke about the themes that he talked about during his many famous civil rights marches. He also, took some shots at not just the South, but some of the northern states that were practicing segregation in housing and in schools, and he really called on the legislators to take action to address those issues. And one of the quotes that he said I found particularly interesting, given the historical reception that he got here. He said, quote, "For one who has been barricaded from the seats of government and jailed so many times for attempting to petition legislators and councils, I can assure you that this is a momentous occasion." So it kind of makes me feel proud that here in Massachusetts we really welcomed him here, when for so many times he fought just to have the right to get up and speak. And yet we welcome him here to come and share his words. And so this happened in 1965, which was a major speech. And his whole speech is reprinted and is now reprinted into the record, and you can get down on a copy of it. It's a great speech at the moment. Okay, another famous speech, and I want to quickly give you another audio here, see if I can make this work.
I speak neither from false provincial pride nor artful political flattery. For no man about to enter high office in this country can ever be unmindful of the contributions which this state has made to our national greatness. During the last 60 days, I have been at the task of constructing an administration. It has been a long and deliberate process. Some have counseled greater speed. Others have counseled more expedient tests. But I have been guided by the standard John Winthrop set before his shipmates on the flagship Arabella 331 years ago, as they too faced the task of building a new government on a perilous frontier. We must always consider, he said, that we shall be as a city upon a hill. The eyes of all people are upon us.
So this is President Kennedy, President-elect Kennedy at the time. So this was 10 days before he was to be inaugurated as president. He came and spoke to the Massachusetts legislature. And quickly became known as his City on a Hill speech. And it was a famous speech. At the time, Massachusetts was kind of going through a tumultuous time. There's been a lot of controversy. There's been some public corruption. So he was asked to come and kind of set the tone for a new administration, a new government, and inspire people. And so he came and gave this City on a Hill speech. And you heard some of those words. He quoted, John Winthrop, Governor Winthrop, and the passage of Arbella when the colonists first came here, and talked about the Commonwealth as a city upon a hill. And today, you can see the dias where he spoke from. Today, if you visit the State House, you can see there's actually an inscription of his City on a Hill speech with some of the words from his speech right in front of the rostrum. And it's a very short speech, actually. I quote it in full in the book, but it's quite a powerful speech, I think, very inspiring. And it was really well received. He wasn't sure how it was going to be received, but it was very well received. People were, really taking to it. And so the interesting kind of fun tidbit here is that, so as I said, this was 10 days before he was due to give his inauguration speech to be sworn in as President of the United States. And so as he was leaving the State House, he was flying back to Washington, D.C., he was asked, how did he think it went? He's really pleased, and he said, quote, "It's going to be hard to meet that standard for his inaugural address." He said, and of course, for those of you who, some of you may remember and know the famous, "Ask not what you can do for your country, but what your country can do for you." Sorry, I just flipped that around. What you can do for your country. Those famous words in his inaugural address became some of the most famous words ever spoken in an inaugural address. And so obviously, in retrospect, he needn't have worried about his inaugural address. It went over really well. But at the time, he was afraid he would just overshadow that with his City on a Hill speech given to the Massachusetts legislature. So kind of a neat little tidbit, a great speech. So I'm going to close here with a fun one. Anybody know what this is? Sacred cod. So this is the sacred cod. This is a 5 foot, about this big, wooden fish that hangs from the chamber of the Massachusetts House of Representatives. In one version or another, the sacred cod is hung in the chamber going back centuries. Even to the old State House, they had a version of the sacred cod. It was hung to symbolize the importance of the fishing industry and maritime in Massachusetts. And it sort of has become, an unofficial mascot for the House of Representatives, for the State House. And so back in 1933, some students decided to steal the sacred cod. It was April 26, 1933. And it was about 4 men. They broke into the State House. So actually didn't break in. They were in disguise, and they snuck into the State House. And they hung out in the House chamber until the session was over, around 5 o'clock. And they reached up and snipped the 2 wires that were holding up the cod and stole it. And you can see here, there we go. You can see here a security guard points to the 2 wires where the sacred cod used to be held. And so apparently the thieves had a big, really long flower box, so they put the cod in the flower box and they walked out and they were able to escape attention. And of course, it was a big deal at the time. This was a major symbol of state government, and so when the cod was stolen, it became front page news on the local papers. This is a clip from the Boston Globe here. They had a story about the sacred cod. The Boston Herald had a story about the sacred cod. There was all kinds of different discussion about where the cod might be, who might have stolen it. There was different searches that were held. This is a cartoon about the sacred cod. The investigation soon led to Harvard University, though. There were some tips that came forward, and so it was the Harvard Lampoon, which is one of the traditional publications of Harvard. Students there were known for engaging in elaborate pranks, and so it was believed that students from the Harvard Lampoon had stolen the cod. And so the police were called in. They were investigating this as a real crime, and so they were sort of narrowing in on some leads, and then an anonymous phone call came in, and the lead detective on the case got a tip, and so he went and met tripping out of a Hollywood movie scene. He went and met people on this abandoned road, and another car came in and got out, and someone who was in disguise brought the pod, put her on the ground, got back in the car, sped off. He couldn't, pursue him in time, and so it was a very elaborate scene. But the sacred cod was rescued. It was mostly intact. There were a couple of the fins that were damaged. Those were quickly repaired. And so you can see here the detective with the return of the sacred cod. And then so 2 days later, it was formally hung back up at the State House, back to its rightful perch. They eventually, they never charged anybody with the crime. I think they felt once it was returned that there was sort of no harm, no foul, and they didn't have any direct proof. So no one was formally charged, but it was broadly known as the Harvard 19 students that did it. And so it led to this famous line, which I had to think about a lot of fun, which said, this is a poem that was read. It was published in the Boston papers shortly thereafter, and it said, the first line said, "Steal all the cabots, if you must, but spare our cause, because we must." So, some fun trivia here, and that is the end of my little talk. These are all stories that occurred under the Golden Dome, which I talk about in the book. I thank you for enjoying this, letting me share a little bit. I hope you enjoyed this discussion. Happy to take any questions that people have. And I have one more book to give away as a prize. Any other questions?
I just want to say something.
Yes.
My father-in-law was a painter, and he painted the Golden Dome. He was one of the painters. that painted the Golden
During the war?
Yeah.
What?
I'm in Rome.
Where is he from?
He was born in Maine, but he lived in Massachusetts.
Oh, wow. All right, well, that deserves it. That's what I need. Well, some of you live through this, this history, which is,
His name is Reddit.
Reddit?
He was also a big superhero.
Okay. Well, thank you. I appreciate it. It's been a lot of fun to kind of share some of the history. I hope you got here, a little bit of a taste of what's, some of the fantastic history that we have here in Massachusetts and State House. So next time you go to visit, you can walk around and be very well educated. So thank you. Thank you very much. Is it all right? Now we're going to
Want to put it together?
Oh, sure. Yeah, come on.
Yeah, okay. Oh, great, thank you.
All right, you don't work for the governor. Next time you have a guest, you tell us all about the governor and what she's doing and everything like that.
Okay, sure.
And pictures and all.
Absolutely. Yes. Lots more time.
And you went back into this.
Yes. Yeah, I got it back. Thank you. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for stopping in.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody. Let me grab my stuff. Put that there.
So anyway, that's our meeting for today. Anyone else got anything they want to say? Well, we're all in one piece here, sitting down.
Coffee's ready.
Coffee is ready, Joe says. And Barbara, she's done such a good job, as she always does. Barbara and Darlene. Darlene, do you have something you want to say? Yeah. Okay, let's all have coffee and whatever's up there.